Welcome to the 2022 SMART4SEA Virtual Forum. We would like to welcome you during this pandemic era. We have allotted for a two-day forum. Within these 2 days, we will be discussing, we have planned for a range of panels. We're starting today with ShipIn 4. We'll continue with game changer technologies, and we'll conclude the day with cybersecurity. At the end of the day, we have planned for the SMART4SEA award ceremony. It will be broadcasted later on at 1600 hours GMT. And tomorrow we have planned for a couple of panels discussing about e-navigation and future of maritime safety, and about the human factors in the smart shipping era. Today, this panel is the opening panel for the event. We will be discussing the ShipIn 4, the fourth industrial revolution is taking place, bringing exponential changes to the way we live, we work, we make business, and we relate with each other. It's marked by emerging technology breakthroughs in many fields, and contrary to common belief that shipping operates in a traditional model, the pandemic has forced all of us to change this old-fashioned way we do business and to embrace innovation and show limited resistance, let's say, to this forthcoming, and I would say accelerated revolution. So today, we would like to discuss about drivers and barriers. Yes, we would like to discuss the impact of the COVID with respect to this transformation. Talking about emerging technology breakthroughs, digitization and the pandemic, smart ships and key smart applications, connectivity for enhanced welfare, smart technologies, and so on and so forth. So in order to have an interesting discussion, we are accommodating the number of panelists. Let me introduce them to you. I would like to welcome Jillian Carson-Jackson, who is the president of the Nautical Institute, Captain Ahmed, who is the director of fleet management with ShipIn Systems, Dominic, NG, who is head of solutions advisory for Wärtsilä Voyage, Manish, who is the CEO of Ocean Technologies Group, and last but not least, Dimitris, who is the managing director of the DANAOS Management Consultants. So I would like to welcome you all, and I would like to ask with my first question, let's say to open the discussion, the dialogue, and I would like to ask, how do you feel that the pandemic has transformed the way we do business in shipping? And do you feel that the maritime industry has done enough during this, approach to a more, let's say, smart shipping? So I would like to hear from you. Let's start with Jillian.
Thank you so much. And there's a lot in that question, actually, just to start off with. How has the pandemic affected the industry is quite broad. I think one of the points that we've heard many times, they say that in every challenge there's a silver lining. And if I was to pick one silver lining in the pandemic for the maritime industry, it's that increased acceptance and comfort with digitalization and digital tools. The industry was already in the midst of a digitalization. We were already going that way before the pandemic hit. What it has helped us do is perhaps move faster along a route that was already laid. So we've actually moved along our course that was already set at an increased rate. It's provided this additional opportunity for collaboration, for greater acceptance of online meetings, which were happening before, but now we're much more comfortable with this environment. We can share ideas and we can work towards collaboration in ways that we really never imagined before. So it has been incredibly challenging. We could go into all of the crew change issues, all of the other issues around that, but to focus on the topic for today and the impact on digitalization, I think one area it has helped us move a bit faster along a route that was already planned. So we'd already charted this course and we've just moved faster along it.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. Dimitris, your thoughts?
Well, the pandemic really, pushed the shipping companies to work remotely. Obviously, shipping companies nowadays have ERP systems in place. The majority of them are web-enabled. So the systems, I think every system was capable of meeting the requirements of remote office. Teleconferencing and other tools were in place. obviously, connecting the vessel to remote offices, you know, and working from home, it was a big challenge. The big problem was the crew changes. People were stuck on board the vessel for years without having the opportunity to visit their families, and they had to sort of survive psychologically and mentally and physically all the circumstances. And of course, the IT technology there gave them conferencing and telephony to their families. Last but not least, you know, shipping is a troubleshooting exercise. Ship management is a troubleshooting exercise. It's an emergency response. So shipping, you know, could manage remote business as ship management. If you go to other sectors like consulting or like software development, believe me, you know, this remote office exercise was an adventurous exercise.
I'm sure it was adventurous for a number of players in our industry as well. Manish, your thoughts? I'm sure you've done a lot from your, let's say, lens. You've done a lot for the crews on board ship. Let's hear from you. How has the pandemic impacted, you know, the way we do business in shipping?
Yeah, maybe just to build on what has already been said, we often talk about the shipping's role. You know, we say without shipping, half the world will freeze and the other half will starve. So let us begin by acknowledging that at great significant personal tragedy to our colleagues at sea, the world has carried on and we have avoided a total meltdown of global supply chains. So that, you know, let that be a starting point. Also, in some ways, it created two very different ecosystems. Seafarers were incredibly isolated, and obviously, the administration's policy didn't move close enough. But it created empathy within industry, largely with the predicament that seafarers always had: remote working. That's what seafarers do. They deal in isolation with complex challenges, with global stakeholders, with limited connectivity and requiring absolute delivery, exactly like the rest of us had to do over the last couple of years. So I feel the biggest, you know, to Jillian's point, the silver lining is that because all of us had to operate in the same way, it propelled connectivity in shipping faster. And I think the point has already been made that it's not revolution, it is the evolution of readily available technologies. But because we moved connectivity by 3-5 years forward, we can now bring more capabilities to seafarers, I feel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Manish. Dominic, your thoughts?
Thank you, panel. First of all, coming in as a third person, we see a lot of similar points, but I pick up from Manish and also Dimitris about remote, and this has certainly been very much the case. We saw a trend. Unfortunately, the pandemic came quickly. There was no baseline, or there's nothing for the industry to benchmark ourselves against. But once it hit, couple of takeaways. One was certainly it accelerated the adoption of certain technology and certain ways of working, has kind of altered the traditional methods. And in particular, we see 4 different trends, which was kind of accelerated, mainly in the area of decision support, because we are not able to get hold of the vessel as quick as possible. So we saw a lot more shoreside capability to support and monitor the vessel. We saw more remote compliance taking place. Class societies cannot send inspectors and surveyors up as easily. Installation, we ourselves at Wärtsilä Voyage, we were also on a kind of a suffering end because we could not get our system quickly with vessel attendants. But thankfully, with the technology, we could do this easily with remote installation. And lastly, an area which I can't speak a lot, it's not my domain specialization, but we see uptick in remote telemedicine, right? Because again, we could not get to vessels as quick as possible for medication and diagnosis of conditions.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Ahmed, your thoughts in order to sum up with this, let's say, opening question with respect to the impact of COVID to the way we do business.
Yes, thank you, panel. Really enjoyed the initial comments by the panelists. While COVID-19 created many setbacks, I think it paved way for several positives as well. So, for example, this digitalization, which surged across industries amid the pandemic, and the maritime industry was also prompt in its digital uptake. So, as we all understand and we all appreciate that the maritime industry's role is indispensable to the world trade. So despite this all unforeseen circumstances, the industry was able to forge ahead and ensure continuity of operation, and which we are all proud of. The pandemic has underscored the importance of supply chain resiliency, and higher tech adoption played a key role in achieving this resiliency. I think what we have been seeing over the years during this pandemic era, we have seen a quick adoption of remote work arrangements. Even for our offices, we were ready to go remote in a matter of weeks only. And then the industry and everyone, they came together. They actually adapted to all these new restrictions, and we were allowed to have remote inspections, remote surveys, and inspections, and so on. So I think it was something which the world could learn from maritime industry, that how quickly they adopted, and then how they have ensured the continuity of the supply chain resiliency. So that is what my take on.
Okay, thank you. I think and I feel after 2 years, because we are more or less 2 years after the outbreak of the pandemic, all of us, and I think the industry has been accustomed to accepting the new way that we do business. Now, I would like to ask, what do you see within the next 5 to 10 years? I'm sure that the pandemic either, let's say, enhanced the importance we should have in several aspects of the way we operate in the past, and of course, as you correctly pointed out, helped us to discover new ways of doing business, like the remote inspections. I fully agree with the remote telemedicine that Dominic pointed out, and I'm sure we're going to see more. So, what do you see if you could let's say, ask you to take your crystal ball and guess what will happen within the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see the industry going? And at the same time, I would like to discuss about drivers and barriers to this digital transformation. Let's start with Manish on this round. Your thoughts, Manish?
Thank you. I've recently talked about the 4 Cs, which got a lot of feedback. The influences on our industry. Carbon, or rather decarbonization effort, the post-COVID normal of the way that we work, connectivity, and what terrestrial levels of connectivity brings in terms of change on board, and how are these mega changes causing the industry to collaborate in new ways that we have not done. So a few very capable peers have reminded me of a few other Cs, like crew, the availability thereof, cash, our ability to be able to invest, and so on and so forth. I think of all of those, the one most profound driver will be the decarbonization effort, because it touches everything else. So money coming into the industry will have to be looked at the lens of whether it is helping the decarbonization. And we are seeing, banks, funds all look at the green investment strategies. And so the good news there is, again, it's not so much about revolution, it's about adoption, it is about evolution. We don't have a choice. We have another 2-3 years to effectively pilot the first demonstrable vessels with some of the non-carbon fuels. We then have till 2030 to get a decent number of vessels out there so that we can really operationalize that tonnage. And then we got some hope of actually delivering to 2050 targets. So I think that is the biggest factor, I feel. I'm sure panelists will talk about a lot of the enablers. I would like to talk about a few barriers that we have been here before and we should avoid. Shipping industry has not necessarily celebrated the first movers in the past. So the pioneers who take the risk, who put capital, who go for unproven technologies, don't always get celebrated, don't always get the air cover that they deserve. Let us change that. and celebrate the operators who are being brave and piloting new technology, because unfortunately, in this case, it looks like the capital and the industry is moving faster, and policy is trying to catch up because of a global industry. So that, I think, is a barrier. Us trying to do the same thing in silos is a very big barrier. So they can't be, it doesn't look like there'll be one solution. We are talking about possibly piloting 2-3 prominent options. And it would be vital that we collaborate as an industry to look at the human aspects. How will we need to prepare the seafarer? How will we need to prepare the ship? How will we need to prepare the supply chain? So let's not go into our silos as often there is a tendency to do. So we got to be careful about those barriers. And then it's going to be the skill barrier. We've had decades to adopt, we've been talking about low sulfur fuel and LNG for, since I was a young boy at sea. And we have got 3-4 years to talk about what would ammonia, hydrogen, methanol, ethanol, and a whole bunch of other options look like. So I think pace is probably going to be a totally different game, but I'll leave for my colleagues to kind of build on those.
Okay. Okay. I would like to ask the the other panelists to approach the question I posed. Let's say we'll approach it in stages. I agree with the majority of what Manish said, but I have to remind to all of you that the drive for the decarbonization is about regulation. So the decarbonization drive is driven by regulation. It's not done by itself. So we have to acknowledge that, because yes, I fully agree we're going to see more in the years to come. But I would like to approach this question, let's say, in stages. Let's start with we'll continue with Dominic. Dominic, what do you see in 5 or 10 years? We'll have a second and a third round for the drivers and barriers and enablers, etc. Because it's a broad, let's say, topic to ask you to address it, let's say, in a couple of minutes. I fully agree with Manish. Dominic, your thoughts? What do you see in 5 years?
I think with or without the pandemic, the digital journey that we notice is kind of, I could be oversimplifying, but it moves across 4 stages. So we see shipping companies moving from tradition, could be a lot of manual reporting, could be a lot of things which are done like the way that they have been the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We see that going across to being connected, the connectivity, having the ships being connected with connected systems. Then we see the evolution going towards smart. We get a slew of different terminologies. Everything on board is smart, right? From smart cargo handling to smart performance to smart reporting to everything, which is correct. At the end, what we are trying to do is to simplify the way that the data is being reported and the use of to ease the decision making onshore. So that's the smart app. And lastly, I think the end point there would be somewhere towards autonomous. Again, when we talk about autonomous, it's an uptake of more augmented reality. We're going to the real sci-fi stuff, going towards digital twinning to do something on a test bed before it actually happens on the vessel. So that's my view a little bit towards where I see the industry moving towards. Yeah.
Okay, Jillian, your thoughts? Where do you see the industry, going towards within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so looking at the next 5 to 10 years, it's really interesting to think of these emerging technologies. And I really want to sort of take a little bit of what Manish was saying and what Dominic was saying. We know there are many emerging technologies. And what's interesting is in the maritime industry, what we might consider as emerging might actually be well ingrained or well used in other industries. So we have an opportunity, I think, to look to see what the technologies are doing across multiple industries, because we can, rather than create our own approaches, we can actually adopt and adapt what's happening in other industries. One of these areas, of course, is automation and automatic systems. So we're looking at autonomous systems, but we're realizing that the move to autonomous systems is not actually designing the human out of the system, but actually refining the role of the human. And this sort of comes back, I think, a bit to Manish's point about what are the training, what are the skill sets that we're going to be looking at into the future. So we can't train young maritime professionals for an industry that we know now. We can't be looking astern and seeing what it is that we learned, because the industry is changing so rapidly. We need to look at how to train our new maritime professionals on how to evolve, how to adapt, how to grow. Even imagine right now. And it's a really interesting point that in the Nautical Institute, we've been trying to come to grips with. And we instigated something called the Autonomous Technology Advisory Group, specifically to look at these concepts of the requirements from the regulatory environment, the development of technologies in multiple industries, and how we can actually look at the future implications of these. How can we provide information and training and technologies for what we're facing now, but also for a future that we can't even imagine? So it's important, I think, to critically consider the developments that are happening in the industry, our industry, but also at a more global level. And that sort of think tank, that collaborative approach that was mentioned previously on how we can address these challenges.
Okay. Dimitris, your thoughts?
Well, the name of the game for the next 5 to 10 years is going to be sustainability. And sustainability has lots of axes. Obviously, the new regulations and the goals set by IMO are going either to bring shipping to new fuels or to new technologies to capture the CO2 in order to meet the emissions. So, but this is the biggest barrier, because nowadays the community does not have a solution. Meaning, if you want to build a ship now, you don't really know what to do. And we are surprised on how many companies are coming to us looking for life cycle assessments, which is very difficult to do for something that you don't know, especially applying AI and machine learning techniques, since you have no data. So a big barrier is the unknown future in terms of what is going to be the fuel or the solution for decarbonization of tomorrow. Still, and I'm sorry to say, the biggest problem in shipping is the communication barrier. Ships still are remote from the office. The communication links are expensive and limited in capabilities. And there is a big potential with the low orbit satellites coming there, which is going to change lots of things. Obviously, the whole world is moving. The fourth industrial revolution is bringing the autonomous vessel into equation. And then we have another problem, which is the complexity of the systems. Nowadays, we address every problem we have with new technology and new systems on board, and the seamen are not trained for that, do not have the competence to manage all that. And if you think for an autonomous vessel, I don't think that this autonomous vessel has to change oil every 1,000 hours. So you have to reconsider the whole infrastructure of the vessel and the infrastructure of the whole thing. Closing, the shipping industry is looking for automation, and the AI and the machine learning really automate the data analytics and the data insights in order to sort of give the people, give the shipping executives the kick in order to make the correct decision, the correct time, providing the data, if not the actual decision roadmap.
Okay, thank you very much, Dimitri. Ahmed, your thoughts? Where do you see the industry within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thanks. Very, very interesting comments by the panel members. So I see that shipping will see further dramatic changes over the coming years. So I was just reading an article the other day. As per a recent study by McKinsey, by the end of 2030, the impact of AI is expected to be about 13 trillion, with over 70% of companies impacted by AI. And then similarly, I was also looking at another article by Forbes, which says that AI is new electricity, and which is already driving a 2 trillion impact on the economy. So what I see here is that the effect of AI on our economy and our lives, and including the maritime industry, is going to be huge. what we will see in the next few years is that digital technology will sweep away the need for the routine and repeated tasks carried out by the ship staff, for example, manual logging of events and so on. Efficiency will improve even further with artificial intelligence helping to track down what is not working correctly. We will be pushed into stricter and more accurate reporting by the needs of the environment. Traditional shipping companies won't disappear, but they will have to adapt to the new ways of thinking. So this is what I see going forward. We see a lot of new technology being adopted within the maritime industry, and a lot of companies will be looking into this technology, which is already available, but I think it is a matter of getting more confidence and getting more awareness of what these technologies are capable of. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. I think I'm one of those who are, let's say, employ a more realistic approach. I think that we have to, let's say, keep a small basket, especially when we hear projections about what will happen the next 5 to 10 years. Why? Because if we go back, let's say 10 years, and I can remind you what we were talking in shipping, because correctly Manish pointed out, we're talking about LNG as a fuel by 2020 with 5,000 ships and so on and so forth. And now if we exclude the LNG carriers, just an example, we have, I think, 500, 600 ships if we add those on the water and in the order books and so on and so forth. The same applies more or less to other projections, for example, crypto, NFTs, you know, AI and so on and so forth. So we have to be realistic for a number of reasons. I'm not saying we have to be pessimistic, we have to be realistic at the same time. So I would like to ask you for a second take, Manish, given what we heard so far, what do you see being the biggest, let's say, barrier? Because I understand what we're talking about, enablers and drivers and so on and so forth. And I fully agree with Dimitris, because Dimitris pointed out the sustainability issue. Now we have an ESG element in everything, more or less. And ESG has to do with a fine balance, you know, maximizing stakeholder satisfaction, taking into account all the stakeholders in the supply chain. So let's say, let's have a second look. What do you see as being, you know, mainly, I would say, the barriers? Or if you would like to have a second take on or what would, let's say, accelerate this movement towards this autonomous shipping, smarter shipping, and so on and so forth. What do you see?
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective, and I think it's a healthy debate to have. I don't actually believe that the policy is clear enough. I think there was some comment here to say, oh, actually, there have been rules made by, I think there was a reference to IMO. No, you know, we're talking about a $5 billion one-off fund to create the think tank to actually evaluate the viable technologies. But once we do home in on what needs to be done, we probably need about 10 times that capital on a yearly basis to carry on. So the biggest barrier is the suspense. The biggest barrier is, you know, the first mover disadvantage to say, actually, I'm about to commit to a ship and I don't know whether this ship is going to be redundant in 3 years' time. So I think taking that tentativeness out and understanding that we are in that zone where progression is actually important. We need the first few, and thankfully we need to celebrate. Many of the operators have already gone off the blocks. We know ships are already on the blocks being built. The biggest barrier I feel having all of those things done is the skill gap. Because, you know, again, I was a young boy when we were preparing the industry for LNG. And now the policy makers have got to understand that if in 3 years' time an ammonia-powered ship is going to come and dock in Tilbury Harbor, that one ammonia emission incident doesn't wipe out the entire east of England. So how do you upskill? And, you know, we're talking about upskill at an industrial proportion. So let's take, when you got Dominic here from Wärtsilä, I could be a second engineer with 15 years experience, you know, all the qualifications And suddenly I am now going to go and take delivery of a brand new ship with a brand new fuel and a brand new propulsion system, control panels. You cannot prepare me with all the information I will need just in case, because we don't have that time. So we've got to build the entire supply chain where the seafarer, the ship manager, the OEM suppliers are all connected into that ecosystem, so that when we do bring that ship into operation, we can bring all the relevant information and expertise at the point of operation, because without doing that, we will be putting quite a significant amount of operational risk into nascent fuels. And one incident could wipe out the prospects of one particular alternative being looked at. So I think it's the upskilling challenge would probably be, it won't be I've got to be careful. It's not a barrier as such, but that will be a very big bottleneck that we need to be mindful of.
Okay, just a quick comment, just for the example, because you mentioned the ammonia. We expect the first engine to be available by 2024, and we expect a normal, I would say, commissioning of the process within the industry with the testing and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure that we're going to see any sort of real life ammonia powered ships earlier than 2028, maybe 2030, maybe in real life. So it takes time. I fully agree with the upscale you said, because it takes a lot of time, and we as an industry and as humans, we tend to neglect that. And we feel that we heard this, we're talking about this today and it will happen tomorrow. Yes, I fully agree on that. Dominic, your thoughts? What do you see as a key barrier?
Yeah, thank you. The draw of adopting technology, the availability is there. We all can see. The push is also known with the pandemic. It just moved things faster. But one of the big problems that we also notice as a common blocker is really that we are in a very fragmented market. Fragmented market, because even for anybody who try to justify an investment, to find a business case to support an investment becomes very difficult. Why do I say that? We have seen this data is now in silos because they're not connected. Solutions today are not linked to a particular business flow. So if we just focus on vessel performance, you see different guys coming in, right? So you have the engine manufacturers coming in to say, well, we could help you to improve performance. We see also the paint makers coming in to say, well, we could also help you to improve performance with quoting. We see also the weather routing providers coming in to say, yeah, we can help you to manage it. Unfortunately, they're all correct. They're all correct, but we can't find a way to weave these things together that the data is available in their own domain. And that's also the other slightly connected issue here that we're talking about is the non-standardized data. So even if we try to bring these things together, we find that we hit another wall because we can't have the data talking to each other because of non-compatibility, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. Dimitris, yes, Dimitris, yes.
I mean, thank you, Dominic. We have discussed, Apostole, these issues so many times in so many fora. I mean, data standards and data exchanges seamlessly is a must nowadays, and for that you need standards. And Dominic is very right. Data has to be made available to every stakeholder in order to fulfill the analysis and deliver the results. So that's coming without saying. But allow me to comment on Manish, and this is very important. The shipping just managed a big radical change to the low sulfur fuels. And this change happened during the pandemic. And we had so many incidents of ships left with engine broken, pistons broken, and they had to manage with minimum. I mean, probably Dominic from Wärtsilä lives this scenario better than us. But us from the shipping side, we had a huge problem maintaining the upkeeping of our vessels with all these new fuels and the effect and the damages they had. And I'm using this example in order to state that the technology is moving that fast and people don't have the time to sort of see what consequences it may have. And then they find themselves in a very difficult situation to troubleshoot cases which they are not familiar with. I mean, all this stuff was really unbelievable to the crew. Even, you know, if you train them with the best training software, you know, that Manish can provide, or if you train them with the special courses of Wärtsilä. I mean, if you have all the cylinders broken, you know, what can you do? And the spares to come in 2-3 months' time. Not to mention the effect that the COVID period brought all the digitalization back, because how you can implement sensors on board existing vessels if you cannot travel to the vessels?
Yeah, that creates a lot of headaches. Jillian, you would like to comment?
Yes, I wanted to comment on a couple of things. Comes back as well, of course, to standardization. I've been doing a lot of work with IALA and the S100 developments and the standardized formats. Really, really critical that we have data that can talk to each other, that we're able to get rid of this fragmented approach that we have. So thank you for bringing those thoughts in. And the concept of the changes and the training and the upskilling. I really believe that we need to recognize and to grow the human capital in shipping and start realizing that we cannot be training people for specific pieces of equipment or specific skill sets. We need to actually focus on giving them that problem-solving skill, because I think as highlighted, we have so many things that are changing that we will not be able to have people that are trained in one specific piece of equipment, because that's going to change and we can't be envisioning what all of that is. So there's a lot of the opportunity to understand more what the equipment's supposed to do, what the digital data is supposed to try to tell you, providing them with an opportunity then to also have access to training, perhaps in real time, just in time, to help take those critical thinking skills that they have, those problem solving skills they have, and give them maybe specific bits of knowledge of information to address an issue that might be arising. It is very, very difficult to think of what the future is going to be like for the young people coming through for the training. This is, I think, some of these critical thinking skill sets are one of the things we need to look at. The OECD has been highlighting that digital intelligence, critical thinking skills, and the ability to do this problem solving for issues that we can't train them for all the issues that are happening. Thank you.
Dominic and Manish, I would like to ask for your patience. I would like to ask Ahmed to comment, and then I'll come to you. Ahmed, your thoughts?
Thank you. Yes, I think I would like to build on what Dominic said about data standardization. I think it is very important to have a standard set of data, and then data communicating with other sets of data being received from various other sources. So far, what we have seen, and which I will call as a barrier, is that there was an inability to analyze and make use of data in real time. As we all know, that we have been collecting data for decades now. I mean, it used to come in noon reports, then we started IoT sensors data, but still we were not getting a complete picture because this data was not communicating with each other. It was not providing the contextual information that why, how, or when something was happening. And because of that inability, we were not able to utilize this data and convert it into actionable information, which will then support the better decision making, and as well as which will drive the efficiency and the performance of the ships. So in addition to this data issues, which of course there are solutions which are available, and they are now able to make use of this data in real time. We also see those typical barriers like hardware cost and installation time, bandwidth availability. I think what we need to do as an industry here to come together and to work as a team or as an industry together, so we can overcome these barriers, because we all can realize the benefits of this data, and then how this data can improve the overall efficiency and the image of the maritime industry as a whole.
Thank you. Dominic, you dropped this standardization bomb and you polarized the discussion at once. Manish, you would like to comment?
I was, first of all, I think Dimitris and then Jillian raised a very, very good issue. And Jillian very helpfully already pointed to the solution earlier in the discussion. We cannot have seafarers or even fleet managers, we cannot have the industry take decisions now entirely on information that they have just in case. So yeah, we cannot train them to take 100%. You have to rely on some that will be information in time, just in time information, just in time insight, specific to the equipment, specific to the fuel, specific to the scenario. But Jillian mentioned earlier that what may be novel to us is actually par for course in other industries. There are a multitude of industries where you have got the entire supply chain, the OEMs, the operators, the people on the side of operation, all connected, so that you can have the right information, the right expertise pumped to the point of operation so that a right decision can be taken. So whether it is the low sulfur fuel and the kind of fuel interaction challenges on the, that Dimitris talk about, or whether, independent of how quickly some of the new novel fuel ships will hit the water, we know now that whenever they do, we will require a substantial amount of information in time that will need the Wärtsiläs of the world, the DANAOS of the world, the oceans of the world to work with the ship manager, the seafarer, to create that information, that dashboard, that support at the point of operation.
Okay, thank you, Manish. Dominic, would like to comment?
Yeah, I like the point that was brought up by which actually nicely point us all back to the title of today's discussion. Dimitri mentioned that it is impossible because of the rising demands for crew to be trained in every scenario, which is absolutely correct, which is also why we see there's an increasing uptake and trend towards having the ship performance and the monitoring done on shore, because that we leverage on technology, we use connectivity on systems, on vessel systems, etc., to supplement or to complement to take away the burden, right, of the crew doing this all by themselves. So I think this kind of wrap things up nicely.
Yeah. At the same time, however, we have to acknowledge that safety as an industry, how the industry performs is better now than it was, let's say, 20 years ago. It starts with how we build ships, how we maintain ships, how we, train our crews, and how in our day and age, we connect with the ship and we provide, correctly pointed out, we provide a lot of supporting, services to those on board, because we don't have to do anything on board. And that creates, I think, a competitive advantage now in these days, given the challenges we have. And at the same time, I think we all have to acknowledge that the same applies to all of us. I mean, we went to a university and we learned something 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that's not enough. Yes, we have the critical thinking and the skills that correctly Jillian pointed out, yes. But at the same time, we have to stay up to date. We have to read. We have to, be in touch and so on and so forth. I would like to ask for any final thoughts and comments on these drivers and barriers. Any comments, maybe, Jillian?
Thank you. So drivers and barriers, and it's really interesting because we do have a number of drivers that we've talked a lot about them, and we've touched on this aspect of the regulatory element. But I think there's actually three. There's the regulatory, operational, and the technical, and there's both drivers and barriers in all of those three. So the regulatory environment is one within which we work, and we have a very regulated industry. We have a lot of approaches to regulation, but we have to ensure that the regulatory structure doesn't inhibit innovation. And the innovation is what is going to really drive from that technical environment, but also the operational environment, thinking of the ways that we can grow, the ways that we can implement technology and start working with that human-machine collaboration as we're starting to move through Industry 4.0, which is one of our titles, but also looking at what's happening with the concept of Industry 5.0. So going beyond the smart products and the Internet of Things and looking at this post-pandemic era with the influence of society, the need for trust in systems and sustainability, which was already touched on today. So we have to respect the boundaries of the planet, focus on the humans being at the center of the work that's happening, realize that these drivers are changes and pushing us ever towards some direction. We really don't know where that will be yet, but we have the opportunity to collaborate and to learn from what's come at us from the industry, from the pandemic, and the way that we've addressed the pandemic within the industry, and look to the future. But I think we do need to focus on those three key areas: the regulatory aspect, the technical aspect, and the operational aspects, both the drivers and the challenges there.
Dimitri, any final comments, any final thoughts on this drivers and barriers issue?
Let's talk about regulatory cases. Yes, for the fuels, we have a clean goal for 2030 and 2050. For the autonomous, for the time being, you have lots of ideas, but so far there is no regulatory framework for any autonomous vessel to operate. Meaning, you cannot class this vessel, you cannot insure this vessel, you cannot even pass it through the flag state because there are no regulations. So it's like the cars, the autonomous cars. There is no regulation for autonomous cars to drive by themselves. You have to drive them by yourself. So people, companies, cannot even think of investing there, even if they have a robust solution to go ahead. This is regulatory side is one point, not to mention that European Union and IMO provide different regulations, sometimes conflicting. Going on the digitalization side, you have seriously to consider the cybersecurity issue, because bringing lots of sensors and lots of CPUs on board and connect them to the land networks, as Dominic stated, and definitely in the future are going to have operation centers running vessels from shore. That's for sure, with all these new things coming on board the vessels. We need sort of take care seriously of cybersecurity. Part of our, just to show you how big is this problem, part of our security awareness drills we have done, we tried to reinstall a company hit by a cyber attack with 50 vessels. It took us 30 days, having only DANAOS system. If they had a different system, it should take us much more. So if you consider the impact currently with all these complex systems that shipping companies currently use, in a case of a cyber attack, the impact may be catastrophic. And all these have to be taken seriously into consideration when you plan towards the future.
Dimitri, may I ask, if let's say I would like to ask you where we are with this learning curve, because you correctly pointed out it may take, let's say, 30 days. I hear friends of mine saying, yes, we have been hit by a virus and a hacker, and it took us, let's say, a couple of days to install our server and so on and so forth. Where are we as an industry, you think now in this learning curve? How many years it will take to accelerate this progression?
In terms of cybersecurity, you mean?
In terms of everything, because you correctly pointed out there's an issue with the standardization, and there's a lack of standardization. Even if we go back, for example, in the ECDIS development, many of the players in the ECDIS industry said after the commencement of the process of making this mandatory, it would be better if we have better standards when we started this process 30 years ago. So standardization is a key issue, because Dominic dropped the bomb with the standardization. That's a key challenge for the industry. That's the foundation where we expect to build the industry. But as you correctly pointed out, if it takes, let's say, a number of weeks to install, even if we don't have too many providers of these software systems, where do you think as an industry, what we have to do, to move forward?
I will start on what we have done. We have done our exercise, and we managed to do an autonomous recovery strategy for our clients. which we are going to present during Posidonia, hopefully. But I think everybody has to start thinking along these lines, because with so many sensors, so many CPUs on board, and so many connections all over, I mean, the possibility of cyber attack is there. I mean, nobody can guarantee you. Believe me, you know, after the experiences I had, I'm thinking in a totally different way about the security of our systems. I was thinking that I was inside a crystal ball and the virus were outside. The real truth is that we are together with the virus and we rely on our antiviruses in order to stop them, which is a thrilling understanding, you know, of the current situation. And you expect, based on that, companies to start base all their operation on IT systems. You know, all these are conflicting. And we have to take serious steps towards that direction. Now, regarding the standardization, this comes without saying. Every vendor nowadays collects his own data, keeps analyzing it in-house, and this is the added value it gives to the client. So you need standards of the industry, de facto standards, which everybody accepts, in order to start negotiating. And also where you keep the data. You keep it at the client's side or you keep it at the provider side. This is another huge issue.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Ahmed, your final thoughts on these drivers and barriers. I have another question before we, let's say, sum up the panel.
Sure, yeah. I would like to build upon what Jillian mentioned about the human element. I think in my perspective, one of the shortcomings in the typical smart ship application is that they heavily rely on machinery data and they miss the most critical factor, the human element. And we have heard a lot that more than 80% of incidents on board ships are attributed to human error. And some studies say it is even up to 96%. So this gives an impression that people are causing the incidents. And to be specific, seafarers are causing incidents. So being a seafarer, I definitely feel the pain here. So because the actual reason is that the ships are getting larger, crew is getting smaller, and ever increasing regulatory requirements have put more workload and stress on already fatigued crew. So basically the mistakes are typically due to conditions, systems, and interaction with the machinery and other people, which makes the work difficult. We can only reduce these mistakes if we understand the conditions in which the mistakes are happening. And without a complete visibility, fleet managers or operators cannot effectively assist the seafarers in reducing their workload or identifying hazards or mitigating risk. So what we need is that we need a visibility. We need a system which provides that visibility. And there is nothing smarter than addressing the most critical factor through the use of technology as of today.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Now, because we have to wrap up the panel, I have one last question. We had an interesting discussion. I would like to ask you to pick one thing. Now, I would like to ask you to pick one thing that you would change that would have either an immediate or a profound impact to move the industry forward towards autonomy, towards a more digitized future, towards Industry 5, you name it. I would like to ask you to pick one thing that would have either an immediate or a profound impact and ask you why you are selecting this thing. Manish, what would you change to accelerate, you know, this progression?
I think if I have to pick one, probably be policy, having more clearer policy and improved acceptable standards. We talk about minimum standards, you know, but we've got to kind of have a much more ambitious approach towards what good looks like. It's not what is minimum look like. What does good look like, and remove the fragmentation, because we won't be able to go to Industry 4.0 with a fragmented approach. So policy that focuses, that forces us to collaborate, because the acceptable standards are going to be higher.
Okay, thank you. Dominic.
My personal choice would be optimization. I believe optimization drives technology advancement. So if we look at the shipping industry in the larger scale, so if everything around optimization is the answer to why we are going to 4.0 and beyond. Safety optimization for those who are in the QHSC. We look at those who are doing performance management. They look at fuel and energy optimization. Engine manufacturers like ourselves goes into asset optimization. The list goes on. Compliance for those who are into regulatory and statutory standards. Those who are into supply chain, we look at logistic supply chain optimization. So I think keyword here is really optimization and how we turn this around into tactical actionable items for our day-to-day lives, regardless of the position that you are in an organization. But I think that's kind of a single goal towards technology uptake.
Thank you, Dominic. Ahmed, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So I think if I had to pick one only, I would choose the ship-to-shore collaboration. I think this thought that the ships can be controlled from shore, I think that is not the right approach. The seafarers, they play a vital role in running our ships, and then this will continue in the coming years. So what we need here is actually a better ship-to-shore collaboration, where people are able to collaborate and communicate on the same information at the same time. We need to remove the barrier of that distance, because ships are now remote, and then there is a high change that the office is trying to get more information. However, how it will work is that we need to provide more visibility, both to the ship and the shore, and then we need to make them work together, shoulder to shoulder, so that they can improve, work as a team, and then improve the performance of their ships and create better value for their customers going forward.
Thank you, Ahmed. Dimitris, your thoughts, what would you change?
Definitely optimization, as Dominic stated, is a very important element. I fully vote for that, but optimization can give us 4, 5, 10% improvement. Here we are talking about radical changes, 50% reduction in emissions, So we have to rethink and remove complexity out of the system, of the whole supply chain of shipping, Think simple and reconsider stuff. Meaning, and try to find solutions which are not out of the box, but solutions which, can give real solutions for the problem with the existing people at the offices and the existing people on board. I think reconsidering the principles in shipping for the last 20 years, ships for the last 20 years are almost the same. Nothing has changed. And minor things, minor things. So we have to think simple. Let's say instead of looking at new fuels, you look for a new scrubber to capture the CO2, which so many research projects on this side. I think this is the way, ahead, which will give a totally new concept in shipping, instead of get stuck to whatever we have and the problems we currently have, which they continue forever if we don't reconsider the solution.
Yeah, fully agree, Dimitris. And I feel that we're going to see more in the carbon capture and storage than what we've seen so far, because it seems a lot more, let's say, promising to what you said. We have the same people and the same ships and the same resources, but we have to solve new problems. So that we need to change the way we think. Absolutely, absolutely. Jillian, your final thoughts to sum up, what is said here. What would you change if you select, let's say, one thing?
Wow, it's really hard because a lot of my ideas have already been taken. So I was really going to go for collaboration. But I would say, based on some of the thoughts that Dimitris has said as well, is it comes down to innovation and the opportunity to be innovative. But that links into all of the other elements that we've had. And we need to think about collaboration, but also even on a broad basis. We need to innovate, come up with solutions to problems. As Dimitris said, we keep coming at these with the way that we have solved problems before. We need to think with new eyes, fresh eyes, and look at this concept of collaboration across industries, across even human-machine collaboration that we have. So I think one of my favorite sayings has always been Piet-Hein. He said, when technology is master, we reach disaster faster. I like to turn that around a little bit and say, what if we, in order to avoid the disaster of technology becoming master, humans and machines can collaborate faster so that we can work towards a future with a vision and an innovative vision to solve the problems, not the problems of today, but actually to have the energy and the innovation to solve the problems that will be coming, because they will continue, as we've all mentioned, the new fuels, the changes, the regulatory changes, the need for standardization. So we just need to bring all of those thoughts together and really look to a future that we can bring our own human-machine collaboration together to solve these problems.
Okay, thank you all very much. I would like to thank our viewers. We have planned for a set of 4 presentations, and we'll get back to you with another panel in an hour time. Thank you very much, and stay tuned. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Apostle. Well done.
Thank you very much.